Hi, I'm Joe Mullings, and this is The Other Side. Today's guest is Scott Huennekens. Scott is a multi-board chairman, both public and private companies in the medtech industry, and he's joining us from Southern California. Scott, thanks for joining us today. I know you're super busy. I think you sit on at least 7 or 8 boards, again, public or private. Thanks for taking the time.
No, absolutely, Joe. Anything to try and help.
You've been super busy. You and I have been in contact since Sunday, on and off between text, email, telephone. And what's going on in the industry right now from your perspective? And you have a very unique one. You've also spent some time overseas looking at the situation.
Yeah, Joe, it really depends on the company itself and its stage and size. I mean, first and foremost, as you know, the reason I went into this industry was to try and help patients. And so across the 8 companies I'm involved in, that's our primary focus, is what can we be doing to help patients? Also, you know, involvement on the board of the Medical Device Manufacturers Association. We've had board calls this week. How can we as an industry rally together in any way, shape, or form? Any of our capabilities we've made available to the federal government, but also, you know, we're global companies, so making ourselves available outside the U.S. in any way, shape, or form, whether it's products, whether it's logistics capabilities, anything to try and help. So, you know, I'm involved in companies that are large, that have more elective procedures, smaller, you know, that are in development and in clinical trials, and the challenges are diverse across all of these at this point in time.
Yeah, the way that public companies are managing their future forward facing decisions and private companies have to be different, and you're involved in both. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so, you know, the 3 public companies I'm involved in, without disclosing any confidential information, I mean, number one is, you know, you draw, as you know, I've always drawn organization charts upside down with the patients and the physicians on top, me as a CEO, now as a board member on the bottom, and we work for these employees and we work for patients. So number one is how do we make sure we continue to service and support our customers? And so if they have procedures going on and there are limitations on access to cath labs or surgical environments, how can we do things and set up to be available on FaceTime or other mechanisms to provide them the support they need while serving patients, supply chain considerations and the like. That's number one. It's all about the patient. And then you step down from there and you say, hey, how do I help employees? So how do we work and organize in order to work from home, but still achieve as much as we can? Then you go to the individual company needs, looking at their balance sheets, revenue, and forecasts, multiple different scenarios. I've said we don't need a best case, a medium case, and a worst case. We need a medium case, a worst case, and an even worse case. And let's forecast the business under those scenarios. Let's understand what our balance sheet looks like. Let's make sure that we have the cash to try and retain all of our employees, not have to lay off employees, not have to furlough employees. We're enacting things like board of directors having their pay cut substantially, leaders having their pay cut substantially, some pay cuts even across the organization, but trying to say, hey, collectively, we're going to live to fight another day. But let's do this as one team together. And it's just been incredible in each of these companies to watch the people and the willingness to sacrifice for the good of humanity, the good of the company, the good of patients across the board. So those are, I think, common things, whether it's a public company or a private company. I think in the private companies where you don't have revenue and you're in clinical trials, we just have to recognize we have to stop in most instances any of these clinical trials. And what do we do to preserve data, preserve, when the opportunity will come to restart, preserve cash, because it's going to be very difficult in this environment right now to raise new rounds venture capital. I faced this back with Digirad in 2001. We filed to go public August 24th, 2001, had about a $30 million revenue run rate, burning $12 million of cash a year, and 9/11 happened. And the markets froze for 6 months, and we couldn't raise money. We ended up having to lay off half our employees and really scale back. But 2 years later, we went public and created and hired all those people back and served patients and did well in the end. And I think we have to kind of have this mentality is preserve the jobs as long as possible, preserve the companies as long as possible without needing outside capital in those private situations, because look, the existing VCs and the deals need to preserve their capital to support the children they have versus per se having or adding more children. And look, it's just people can't travel, people can't do due diligence, so you have to assume the worst in these private company environments where you're burning cash.
Given some of the information you have, the experience you have, and certainly perhaps some of the connections you have, do you have any forecast on when that first concentric circle of normalcy may come back, and then certainly the far-reaching one? Would you spitball that at all?
I don't know that. I don't have any keen insight, Joe. This is, on the one hand, you could look at China not having a lot of new cases and say, hey, that could be a best case scenario where there's an off ramp here in 3 to 6 months. I don't think that's reasonable. And vaccines and different therapies, there's timelines associated with. I think you need to plan as a business and with your employees, for something that's going to be, 12 to 18 months, and evaluate on a weekly, bi-monthly basis, and then change your plans accordingly if things end up getting better. But I think you need to assume and plan for the worst. I mean, it's back to those curves, right? Of your expectation and reality. And if expectation is always above reality, you're disappointed and you're not happy. But if it's the opposite, then you can get into a more optimistic viewpoint. So I'd rather let's have a plan that's digestible and workable, not a plan or assumptions that any of us wanted as a society or a company or down to a family level. But let's face that reality, and and then let's work our butts off, on all the different areas that we can create impact to make it better than that.
Scott, I'm so happy to have you part of this early in this initiative with the other side, because you're such a experienced, steady leader. And there are a large number of first-time CEOs who are following this initiative, the other side, and right now they're scared to death, and they should be, as well as investors, and they should be. And even tenured leaders are afraid, and they should be. What guidance, and you've given some great here, but let's go back to young Scott Huennekens in 2001, and let's go to the you still have hair, Scotty, the salty-haired sort of sage today. What would the advice to be to Huennekens in 2001 be, given what we're facing today with what you've learned? And if you could break that down.
Yeah, no, I had a great experienced leaders who'd been through other trying experiences. Tim Walliger was our chairman at Digirad at that time, and it was very, comforting and reassuring. And, his words of wisdom of, we'll get through this. I remember the phrase over and over, even at the beginning of Volcano, when we were having problems with our clinical trials and the data. It's like, tough times don't last. Again, tough times don't last. Tough people do. Tough companies do. And so I found that very reassuring always. Like, I'm a tough person. Get your tough on, and we'll get through this, and it'll be different than we thought. Look, I mean, it's very difficult. The millions of dollars that I had in stock in Digirad became $155, and it was a mediocre dinner and a babysitter and a bad bottle of wine, for that experience. But but Joe, Volcano never would have happened, which was a tremendous success because I left Digirad at that time, post 9/11, and went and started Volcano, which became this tremendous story. So you never know what's going to happen. You just got to get on your front foot every day, toughen it up, and try and make the best decision on that day. And you know that it's going to work out. It's not going to work out the way you had envisioned before all of this, but it will work out. So that's the main thing, and try and accept the things you can control and the things you can't control, but plan for that worst and then adapt off it. Like the advice that I gave earlier that's the exact advice I'm giving, my 5 private CEOs today is let's go with that set of assumptions and try and be, a leveling force for them. We may be 12, 18, 24 months behind where we thought we were when this is all said and done, but we'll still have the opportunity to compete, win, and provide the solutions that we wanted to. That's a different, that's a changing of the goals. You've heard me over the years. It's what is the goal? It's PDCA, plan, do, check, adjust. So what does our plan need to be now given these circumstances? Okay, let's do that. Let's check that on a regular basis. Let's adjust. And that's this continuous loop. We've got you may have done that on an annual basis or a 6-month basis. Now you need to do it on an every couple of weeks basis. Checking your assumptions would be some direction that I would give to people.
You know that the CEO role and the leadership role at times is lonely. You're always reaching out and helping everybody else. But when you go sit down and you sit there at the end of the day staring out the window at what you accomplished and what you potentially saved, there's a gap there between who's watching out for the CEO. What guidance would you give to those who want to support CEOs who are in this situation and are most of the time standing alone? And that's our choices. But what guidance would you give for people to think upwards as well?
Yeah, I don't even, that isn't even a question for me right now, Joe, to be honest with you. And what I mean by that is that I think it's more important to be thinking about the patients and these doctors that are on the front line. CEOs they're making more money than other people. They're going to have food. They're going to have their house, and all that. I'm more worried about the local restaurant owner, local, my housekeeper. I'm more worried about those people. I'm more worried about the employees. Now, so with that said, to your question relative to the CEOs leading, the CEOs making decisions that affect all of those people, the clinicians, the employees, et cetera. My advice to them would be, hey, rely on your board, reach out to your board. These are generally experienced people who've done this before. Get insights from them. Reach out to, people on your own team, reach out to your network of other CEOs. We're humans, we're community oriented, and there's power in talking with others and getting inspiration and getting ideas and getting motivation. Don't rely on just doing that yourself. I mean, you've been and trained world-class athletes, and that community that you can build, each of those people pushing each other, versus just pushing themselves to get to the next level is critically important. If you're an employee at a company, know that, your CEO needs a pat on the back every once in a while. Send them an email. Go, in today's environment, send them a text. Appreciate how hard they're working. Know how difficult that is. Everybody wants to be appreciated. Similarly, the CEO should be sending that to customers, his employees, et cetera, as well. We need to keep everybody boosted up. Like, do unique, fun things. Make it incredible. Last night, at Acutus, where Vince Burgess is the CEO and an electrophysiology company that we're commercializing right now, we're ramping up. We had happy hour online. We had over 60 employees. for the half an hour to 45 minutes of a happy hour. Guys saying or gals saying this is their favorite drink, how they made it, this is my favorite beer. But that camaraderie, think about how you can do some of these unique things. I've got a group of friends from business school. We're planning an online poker game, this weekend. People are doing funny things like pub crawls around their house with their neighbors, virtually. It's like, hey, we're gonna have wine in this room and then this and that. I mean, you're smiling. That's the key. You want to keep people smiling and looking forward, having a sense of humor now. I mean, how funny are some of these jokes and stuff that people are passing along? It has a clinical impact on your state of mind, but also on your immune system. Yeah. So anyway, try and keep the spirits of your organization up. Everybody embrace trying to have 4 or 5 people they're watching out for. Some people live alone right now. They need a little more reaching out than a family. The families may be pulling each other's hair out, but at least there's someone to pull your hair. Versus, it can be lonely. 2, 3, 4, however many long weeks this lasts.
Yeah. Yeah, and California just had pretty much a statewide lockdown for the most part, other than non-essentials, right?
That's right. Starting last night, shelter in place throughout the whole state. You mentioned, Joe, my international travel. I was in Japan twice in January and was up in Hokkaido. And right as we left is when Hokkaido went into lockdown and closed all of their schools. And we were nervous going there to go skiing. By the time we went and the time we left, the world kind of changed there. That ship in the harbor in Yokohama. Then I went to Europe 2.5 weeks ago. I'm actually on day 13 of my own personal quarantine because I was in Italy, and when I landed in Europe 2.5, 3 weeks ago, there were 300 cases in Italy. 12 days later, when I left Europe, they were over 10,000. And I was with the head of Medtronic Italy for those 3 days when I was skiing over the weekend before I left. And he was on the phone every day. He was leading the effort of industry coordination of the supply chain. And that's when I got on the phone with people I knew, at MDMA and in the government, and said, look, you're seeing these pictures of Trump at dinner at Mar-a-Lago, with the president of Brazil. And I'm like, this has got to stop. And I know one of the people that was at that dinner. I'm like, this is serious. This is going to be out of control. And people in my text chain of these people said, you're being an alarmist. And I said, I'm happy to be called an alarmist. Now all of those people that were calling me an alarmist are apologizing 2 weeks later. This is very serious. And I'm not saying I'm smarter than anyone. I just, out of coincidence, happened to see the beginning of it in Japan and experience it, while being in Europe, and then, specifically in Italy. So yeah, we're shelter in place, and I would encourage everybody, even if you're a place that's not shelter in place, that's the best thing to do. You saw the mistakes they made in Italy. We should be thanking the Italians. They have a wonderful spirit. They're wonderful relative to wanting to get out and be with each other, which is what we should be as humans. They are paying a price for that. They've reacted and are fixing it. Hopefully we'll see the bending of the curve, but we've learned from that. We need to be isolated. And so I'd encourage everybody in their businesses, their personal life, we have a responsibility to each other first and foremost versus ourselves. And that's what I would encourage behavior-wise as we go forward. And I'm happy Gavin Newsom in California is leading the charge here, moving to this kind of decision.
Yeah. It's you and I had communicated over the weekend, and I had made light of something, and you quickly adjusted me. And again, prescient, as you pointed out. I mean, that got my attention on Sunday night when you and I chatted. And I passed that same non-alarm across to the people I knew, and I think it may help if everybody goes that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for doing what you're doing here, Joe. It's you heard the alarm bells and you jumped on it. We all need to do that. What can each of us do to help? And everyone can do a little something. Everything from staying home to, my 20-year-old son. We've put his name out there to go shop for over 80-year-olds to go get their groceries because he's home from college. So we can all do little things to try and help in our community in one shape or another.
Yeah, and in a weird way, this distancing has brought us together, as a lot of people have said. Scott, you're always a fantastic resource. I know you're super busy running a number of organizations as well as keeping yourself and your family safe. Can we reach out to you from time to time just to check in to see what your thoughts are on the situation as it continues on?
Sure, absolutely, Joe. Always here to try and help the medtech community, the broader community, and you guys at the Mullings Group specifically.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I really value our friendship, and I wish you and the family the best, and stay safe, my friend.
Yeah, same to you and your family and the Mullings family as well.
Thanks so much, Scott. I appreciate the time.
All right.
I'm Joe Mullings, and this has been The Other Side.